Welcome to the Sheffield Sunday As Bill Season meeting. This is a main share meeting, and today it is with great pleasure and much gratitude that we welcome Tim Seeg from London, who's come to share for about 40 minutes, after which we'll open up for general sharing, or if you'd like to ask a question. Thank you, Tim. It's wonderful to see you here and have you here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Tim. I'm an alcoholic. Thank you for having me. My home group is the Brick Lane Big Book Study in London on a Saturday. We go for dinner afterwards. That's more important than the meeting. Now, I know the standard is for the speaker to, as you put it, hand pick the reading. I actually asked someone else to pick it for me. I don't know how to pick readings, and they picked this, and it's just fine. Now, some basics. Before going into the Serenity Prayer, one might legitimately ask the question, why bother? What's it? Why have a Serenity Prayer? Why have a prayer? What are we even doing here? One can be in AA for so long, one forgets why one is there in the first place. And the reason I'm still in AA, my sobriety date is the 24th of July, 1993, for those who like dates and numbers and arithmetic. The reason I'm still in AA is because I'm physically different than regular folks. What does that mean? That means that when I have any substance, I'm off to the races. I'm going to feel as though I want more. Now, I don't really want more. It's not like when my other half says, what do you want to watch on Netflix this evening? I select a film which appeals to me. The truth is I'm compelled to have more, and that compulsion appears to me like I want to do it, but it's not wanting in the ordinary sense, it's compulsion. How do I know that I'm compelled when I have the second drink, the fifth drink, the 20th? Is because I tended to drink more than I intended. I in practice, drank more than I intended. I afterwards regretted how much I drank. I never woke up in the morning thinking, I wish I'd drunk more last night. I always woke up wishing I'd drunk less. I did things I would never do sober, and I harmed people, and I certainly would never have harmed people in those ways sober. Now, anyone can have that happen a couple of times. Once that happens several hundred times, you know that it's not wanting that is taking place. It is compulsion that is taking place. This is not caused by anything. One of the marvellous things about going to 100,000 AA meetings as opposed to listening to a single expert on alcoholism in the world out there is that any of the explanations that people sometimes give us from the outside world as to why we're alcoholics, they just don't stack up once you've been to 100,000 meetings and heard 100,000 different stories and situations. There are people with terrible childhoods. There are people with idyllic childhoods. There are people that took decades to get there. There are people that were like that from the get-go. There is nothing in common between the people in AA except the alcoholism. And that lets me know there's a wonderful word in the doctor's opinion, phenomenon. A phenomenon is simply something which I apprehend. It is simply there. I don't need to ask why it is there. It is simply there. And the phenomenon that is simply there is that when I have substances, if an addiction is activated in me, it winds down when it winds down. I don't put the plug in the jug. The plug in the jug is put for me. So I must never have another substance. I must never have any addiction in my life activated because like dominoes, one will hit all the others. So far, so good. Why would that necessitate being in a fellowship? Why would that necessitate going to meetings? Why would that necessitate all of the other stuff? It's because of the way my alcoholism works once I am sober. It gets very twitchy when I stop using substances or acting out in other ways, and it will do anything. I think of the it of alcoholism as being a little subroutine in my brain. It's not even thinking, it's not feeling, it's just programmed to get me the decision maker in my life to get me to have the first one, because it knows if I have the first one, I'll have the rest. It'll be in clover. That's all it wants, as it were. And now there's a paradox here in the Big Book. I'm a very great fan of the Big Book. FYI, the instructions are in there. The program, as the book itself says, is the contents of the book up to 164. It's not just the summary on page 59 or the wall scrolls. Those are an aid memoir to the full program. The full package deal is everything up to 164. If one is asking oneself, am I working the program? One should really ask oneself, am I working the aggregate of those 164 pages plus the doctor's opinion in my life as a whole? That's the question. Now, it's very curious. If you read the, as it were, poster boy stories for alcoholism in the Big Book, after a while something strikes you. The main people who are used as examples of alcoholism bear almost no relation to the average alcoholics one encounters in one's home group, including oneself. So the man of 30 has a brilliant career for 25 years. Who else have we got? We've got a certain American businessman who is in the peak of mental and physical condition. Jim, nothing much wrong with him. This is page 35 for you page number people. He's doing terribly well as well. He's got a few ordinary human emotions, but by golly, if having an emotion got me drunk, you'd have a different speaker today. And Fred is having a sensational time. His personality is sensational. His day is sensational. He's suave and sophisticated and competent and much loved. And these are very carefully chosen because their cases are not complicated by other conditions. So if you read a medical textbook and it's describing someone who has, say, heart disease, the description of the person will be of someone who has heart disease where it's not complicated by diabetes or other conditions. To see the condition on its own, it has to be on its own. So the people in the book are exceptional because they have nothing wrong with them but alcoholism. You look around AA meetings, I certainly had a lot wrong with me socially and mentally and practically and physically, in all sorts of ways. Things weren't working out so well when I got sober. And that's true of most people I've sponsored. They scrub up very well in the initial conversations about whether or not I'm going to sponsor them. They perform brilliantly, but everything comes out of the woodwork after a few days or weeks or months or years. There's a lot going on in there. Buckle up if you're sponsoring people. There's a lot going on. But those people in the Big Book are, as it were, pure alcoholics, and they're chosen because they illustrate the real nature of alcoholism. And the real nature of alcoholism is this, is my alcoholism doesn't need any actual excuse in my life or anything else wrong with me. It is able to outwit me, even if everything else is sorted out and I'm having a sensational day. It is capable of getting me to have the first drink. When people relapse, it is not because of having a bad day or having a bad week or whatever. But those things, now here's the interesting thing, I think there's a paradox here. Those things can make alcoholism's job slightly easier. Now the danger in AA is to think that if one sorts one's life out, one needn't drink anymore. And so people will often say, well, I've got a wonderful life today. I know what I would lose, and so I'm not going to have a drink. Or I don't feel like a drink today. That's like saying it's not raining that now, therefore it will literally never rain again. Mad. But that's what one hears all around AA. I'm okay, I feel okay right now. Therefore, I'm not going to drink. And the book is very clear. If you're an alcoholic and you're untreated, then you're going to drink regardless of the need or want to stay sober. Needing to stay sober recognizing the need to stay sober, wanting to stay sober, those are necessary but insufficient to achieve sobriety. The real problem with alcoholism lies in this. My alcoholism speaks to me in my own voice. If I am my own high commander, one day I'm going to drink. Very simple. I must therefore not be the high commander of my life. Someone or something else must be in charge. Now, of course, you're at liberty to have whatever you want as a higher power. There's the famous doorknob and number 19 bus, and nature is all very lovely. But will nature keep me sober? I don't understand how that would work. But a sentient, intelligent, creative higher power, I can understand how that might want to keep me sober and might be able to keep me sober. It's got to be smarter than me. I've got to have someone or something that I trust to make the decisions in my life. It has to have decision-making capabilities. When you start to think about how one is supposed to relate to the higher power per the 12 steps in the Big Book, one discovers although one can have anything as one's higher power, to actually get it to work, there are all sorts of constraints. It's not really Liberty Hall. You can try anything, but good luck if it's not someone you can communicate, a power you can communicate with. I've seen people try to avoid that. And really, the problem there is one doesn't like the idea of something more intelligent taking charge. The idea of nature or trees or something is lovely to have as a higher power because it represents no threat to me being the high commander of my life. The idea that another sentient being might be able to pull rank on me, that's quite different. And Bill talks about this where he says he objects to the notion of the Tsar of the heavens. Why? Because it represents a personal threat to his position, in pole position in his life as the person enthroned and in charge. So I need to have a higher power. And I need to not just have one as a notional gonk on the shelf. The relationship must be an active, working relationship. You see, this is getting very, very bad news. I have to obey God. It's as simple as that. That must be the basis for my life. It says in the Step 7 prayer something about doing God's bidding. The removal of defects certainly does take place, and it is through God. However, I must spend the rest of my life doing God's bidding. That is the mechanism that activates the removal of the defects. I only ever need to do one thing after Step 7, which is do God's bidding. Now, exactly what that looks like on a daily basis will vary from day to day. There's a little bit of devil in the detail there. But essentially, that's the only thing. If I do God's bidding every moment, every day, I will not drink because God isn't thirsty, as Grady O.H. says. If I'm in the habit of completely ignoring whatever my mind says because it is not a useful source of information, then when it says, let's have a drink, then I'm not going to. Now, if I could drink, therefore, only if I were back in charge, if I were the Lord High Commander. However, as I said earlier, the paradox is if I get unhappy enough, sober for long enough, this will make alcoholism's job a lot easier to get me back. My alcoholism, in a sense, has been removed, but not removed far. It's within arm's reach at all times, just like the character defects. It is waiting to be activated. Now, one needn't be frightened by this, because in the Big Book, although there are those rather alarming statistics, about half of people get sober straight away and another half get sober after some slips, and there's some improvement with the other quarter. I think today we've got it a lot better than that. It says that those statistics apply to those who really tried, who came to AA and really tried. Honestly, I look around me in AA, I look at my own experience. As soon as I was really trying, unreservedly, I stopped relapsing. I see that around me. Those that really try don't relapse. I don't think there are exceptions to that. It's difficult to be conclusive, but honestly, I don't really see exceptions. People can try for a while, and then God's grace is so great that one has to slip for quite a while, usually, or have undisclosed reservations. But essentially, there's nothing to worry about. One needn't drink again because the program will give me something to do for 24 hours a day, as long as I'm willing to pay the price. So Bill, in Bill's story, talks about paying a price. What is the price? The price is fourfold. Number one, effort. Number two, pain. Number three, sacrifice. Number four, uncertainty. If one is willing to withstand the assault of those four, then there is nothing to be frightened of. Now, alcoholism, active alcoholism, fortunately, trains one in all of those things. I had to go to extraordinary lengths at times to get alcohol. That's the effort. It gave me extraordinary pain, and yet I did it again. It required extraordinary sacrifice. Each other area of my life was amputated one by alcohol, so I'm perfectly capable of sacrifice. And uncertainty, you want uncertainty, have a drink. That'll give you uncertainty. So I have the capability to withstand considerable amounts of sacrifice and uncertainty and pain and effort. All I need to do is redirect those faculties to staying sober, and Bob's your uncle, I'm fine. Now, why is the Serenity Prayer such a good summary of the program? Well, I'll tell you. If you think about what the opposite of the Serenity Prayer, one tiny thing on the Serenity Prayer, note how they got it from somewhere else. Everything we've got in AA, we got from somewhere else. We just put it together. And we must thank those people. Anyway, Serenity Prayer. What is the opposite of that? The opposite of it is not accepting all of the things that we cannot change and attempting to change all of those, and then not changing the things we can, but simply sitting there and complaining. Now that would be a good description of the average alcoholic untreated, is to have the Serenity Prayer upside down. Now, what is this a marker of? Unhappiness is not really the thing that is going to get me drunk. The thing that is going to get me drunk is self-will. And that profound unhappiness is a marker of self-will. When I'm unhappy, I haven't got my own way. Whose way? My way. Oh, apparently I have a way again now. And if I've got a way, then I'm going to be busy with my way rather than busy with God's bidding. The protection from God remains operative for as long as I keep up the insurance payments. What are the insurance payments? The daily working of 10, 11 and 12 once the first 9 steps have been completed. Completed means every last amend, including that one. You know that one? That one. You have to do that one as well. No good saying spiritually, oh, in God's time, I'll do it in God's time, when God makes the opportunity available to me. But I'm so spiritual. I'm so humble and passive. I just let God provide me with the opportunity. Phone book. Look in the phone book. Do a search. Go to LinkedIn. Go on every single. You have to sign up to loads of these wretched social media networks to find the buggers. Find everyone that might have known them and go through them one by one and discover you have to make amends to half a dozen of those before you can even get to that person. Just that has to be done. Entrance price to the new life. Last 3 steps. Doing God's bidding. The sign that I'm not is that I'm unhappy. Because even if I'm doing the right things externally, in my heart, I'm preoccupied with my way. Now, and my first 15 years in AA were not bad. I did steps quickly. I did service. I've always been someone that likes systems and being given things to do and shown ways of doing things and just sticking to it. I like all that. And so I fitted in quite well in AA, and I did service, and there was a bit of a hiatus when it came to meetings for a couple of years. Although I continued to pray and was building a relationship with God, I came back to meetings around 10 years I hadn't drunk. First 15 years were characterized by significant progress, but a number of unresolved difficulties. I had never really fully given myself to the basics of the program. And I was one of those people who thought that I would be forever recovering, that this was going to be a long, slow, painful deal which would be dragged out over decades, the getting to a position of being comfortable in myself. In one American city, I'm told the popular slogan is, "I wish you a long, slow recovery." Now, that's a backhanded wish, if ever I heard one. I thought I was going to remain emotionally crippled by my childhood forever. I thought I was broken and that was the end of it. And I started to look outside AA at different therapies and approaches and books, and I gained a huge amount of insight. But the books became very thin when it came to actually doing something about the problem. They were very good on elaborating all of the ways in which the poor upbringing I'd had was apparently causing my emotional problems 10, 20, 30 years later. Not so much on the solution side. Now, the fact is the answer was in the big book the whole time. I'd just never really given it full credence. I'd never given it a full go. When I gave it a full go, I was all right. Now, there was a bit of turbulence for a couple of years as a few kinks had to be worked out. But essentially, once I started to fully adopt the program as a way of life, as opposed to a bolt-on to a life in which I was very firmly in charge and very competent, as soon as I fully gave myself to it, I started to realize that peace was available at any time and under any circumstances. And I'll quickly run through the three basic principles, I think, of the program when it comes to achieving emotional balance, some kind of emotional stability and peace and happiness. And the first one is absolute acceptance of everything the way it is right now as being the way it is meant to be. Now, that doesn't mean that effort might not be required on my part to improve conditions in some way, but the fact it is the way it is right now is God's will. Now, that's very difficult. You see, God is involved in this. And one of the keys was given to me in this form, that whatever is going on in my life or in my observation is either God's direct will. God would like that to be happening. So crocuses are coming up. God wants crocuses to come up. Very good. And then you read a terrible thing, or you see a terrible thing, you experience a terrible thing. And you say, well, that's God's will too. But it's not because God wants the bad thing to happen, but the bad thing is a price of the material world, and God wills the material world. Part of the price of the material world is that things die. Part of the price of free will is that people will exert that free will in a way which is damaging or harmful, or simply disagreeable or upsetting, but something. You can't have free will without bad behavior. You can't have life in a material sense without death. So although God doesn't like those things, they're permitted as part of a bigger picture. Now, that's a lot to swallow, but here's the thing. What it was suggested to me was simply to take that to be true. Leave the theology for when I'm in a good mood. When I'm in a good mood, investigate how that is the case, why that is true, but don't make me achieving happiness dependent on me understanding those theological concepts, but simply to say the way things are is God's will, and that's the end of it. Now, God might want me to play an active role in helping students improve, showing something to a sponsee, doing something for a client. All of those things will change the world in tiny, tiny ways, and those will build up and the world will gradually change. But the way things are right now is the way they're meant to be. There is no comparator. The problem is having a comparator. The problem is having a notion of how I think things ought to be, and the world hasn't matched this. That is the problem that acceptance solves. And even for those things which must be changed, I have to accept that let's say I have a character defect of having a terrible temper. I'm putting that in the hypothetical as though it's hypothetical. I have a terrible temper. I have to accept that I have one to do something about it. So even when it comes to the things that I'm supposed to change, acceptance is involved as well. So acceptance is the answer to all of my problems, because even those things where I must change, I must accept before I change. If I pretend the thing isn't the way it is, then I'm not going to get round to changing because I'm brushing it under the carpet. That's the first principle. The second principle is trust. And the trust is this, that God will provide, that God will look after me, that the covenant in step 3 is going to hold under all circumstances. Yeats talking about the centre will not hold. God's centre will hold. In other words, if what I do is stay close to God and perform his work well, doesn't need to be elaborate, pray a lot, and do the next right thing, then I'll be given everything I need. When I'm frightened, I'm not trusting that. I'm saying I'm right in my assessment. God is wrong. When God says, trust me, God's wrong. Fear is outright rebellion against God. Non-acceptance is outright rebellion against God. And the third thing, so I've got to try, I've got to accept, I've got to trust, but there's a third thing. The third thing is responsibility. You'll note that the two things so far, essentially resentment and acceptance, fear and trust, those are the first two inventories in the step 4. The third inventory in the step 4 is the inventory of my conduct, when I stop blaming everyone else for anything that is going on in my life, and I stop blaming anyone else in particular for how I feel about any of those things. It's pretty true to say that with almost every bad situation in my life, I created the conditions as an adult. Childhood is different. As an adult, my childhood is over. It's been over for a long time. I needed to wake up to that. Anyway, back to adulthood. In my adult life, I created the conditions. The people that I thought used me badly, I chose them out of all the people I could have chosen. I chose them. Why? That's the question. The destination is printed clearly on the ticket. When I look back, I knew what I was getting. If it's on your plate, you probably ordered it. And that's what I've learned in the program, that I am responsible for the life that I see around me. But even in those rare cases where something materially affects my life, my external life, my circumstances, where I did not create the conditions, even in those cases, I am responsible because I'm responsible for my upset about those things. I am responsible for having a personality that does not adjust to the constant flux and change of life and the world and fortune. So I'm responsible all the way along. Whilst I still have pronouns in my narrative of him, her, and it, whilst those are still operative, I'm still a victim. And what's fascinating is that the answer to all emotional upset, all resistance to reality, is provided on page 67 of the Big Book. The answer to all fear, whatever the fear is there on 68. And the answer to all conduct, to taking responsibility for my life, is there on page 69. We ask God to mold our ideals and help us to grow towards those ideals. The program proper starts on page 63. Up to then, it's just, here are some ideas, here are some stories. You want to make a decision? Great, make a decision, say the prayer. 63, that's where the program really starts. By 69, 6 pages in, we have the answer to all emotional upset. We have the answer to all fear. We have the answer to every single problem in my life. As it says on page 42, the discovery that spiritual principles would solve all of my problems. 6 pages in, I have an answer to every single problem. And it was pointed out to me when I was a number of years sober that I thought I was so great at the program. I'd been sober a long time. I'd sponsored lots of people. I'd done lots of service at lots of different levels. I hadn't understood how to apply the basic principles in the first 6 pages of the program, entry level. Now, the task of applying those solutions, of course, one is constantly learning, one is getting more effective and efficient. But to sit there as I did in the first 15 years, as though there were no solutions to those things, as though I was going to have to live with those forever, I was quite wrong. The solutions were there, and they are very effectively summed up in the Serenity Prayer. Friends will be bored by my recounting this small interlude, because I often refer to it. A number of months ago, I complained to my other half. I came home, I'd built myself up into quite a froth about something or other, and I felt very ill-used by, I think, a client, great big corporate client, so that, of course, feeds into all of the fears of authority and power. And I thought I was going to get a good 5 minutes of sympathy. Now, I issued my little complaint, and what I was expecting was, oh, aren't they dreadful? What I got was this. So, what are you going to do about it? When anything happens, my question is, what am I going to do about it? Do I accept it, or do I accept and then take some action? That's it. Move straight into the solution. Do not dawdle over it. Resentment doesn't happen to me. It is permitted by my accepting the invitation to the dance. Fear does not happen to me. The opportunity to fear, to be fearful, arises, and I can either accept the opportunity or reject it. When a problem arises, an apparent problem, I'm given the opportunity, because I've read the 6 pages. The program is not complicated. Someone said to me, this is a little diversion, that they wanted a new sponsor. I said, why? They said, I want to go deeper. I don't think there's any depth. Those 6 pages are enough. Everything else is an elaboration of those. Those basic ideas are the whole thing. Anyway, back to when a situation arises. I'm given the opportunity to say, before the emotions hit, before any trouble starts, this is exactly part of God's plan. So you're heading off the resentment at the pass. God's got a solution to this. God's outside time and space, FYI, which means from God's perspective, God knows the ending already. Like, if you're a character in a novel on the shelf, there's a past and there's a future. There's the pages ahead. The character doesn't know what's on the pages ahead. The person in the room can pick up the book and leaf through it and find whatever is going on. God knows the answer. God knows the solution. When I pray now, how do I know that my prayers now are not what saved me 10, 20 or 30 years ago? Because those prayers reach God now, outside space and time, and God is able to access all of space and time at once. So that can be my response to any situation. It is exactly the way it's meant to be. And God has already created a solution, and there is a path for me to follow, which will be revealed to me one step at a time. And then what is my responsibility? What actions can I practically take? If I take those actions and keep my mind focused entirely on the taking of those actions, I'll be absolutely fine. And that's how I handle challenges that arise. Now, sometimes there are little road bumps, and it takes me a couple of weeks to really get into it. Sometimes you're just whacked sideways. But there's a fundamental difference between the general state of swimming around in a soup of negative emotion, which I did for years. And when I am hit by a challenge today, I know fundamentally that this is God's will. Everything is fine. Everything is going to be fine. There is no problem. I just can't see it, and not being able to see it is a little bit alarming. Now, this is where the second half of that reading comes in. I'm going to try not to be rude about other things. Okay. When I was about a year and a half sober, I thought, right, I need to do the meditation thing. I wasn't doing the meditation thing. So immediately I sort of left AA circles and went and learned how to meditate with a Christian group and then with something else. And I read the Buddhist books and all of that. I wish I'd read what AA says. Now, meditation, what it means in the outside world in different religions is none of my business. What I'm interested in is what it meant to the people that inserted the word into the steps. I'm not there to impose onto the steps a 21st century reading of any of those words. I should be interested in the context in which something was written and in the message that they were trying to send. There are no valid interpretations. There's only an approximation. How close am I to what they meant? And when they explain meditation in the big book, and also early Al-Anon is very good on this, because the early Al-Anon was very aligned with early AA. So the early Al-Anon writings, which are far more voluminous than the AA ones, make very clear, again, what is meditation? You take a religious or spiritual book and you say, these people know more than I do. These people are super connected to God. I'm going to set myself aside completely and immerse myself in the words, immerse myself in the ideas, and let God speak through those texts directly to me. And so when I had a challenge earlier this year, I don't have problems, I have challenges or blessings. When I had a challenge earlier this year, I hit the books. Now, hitting the books these days means hitting the Audible, because I have very little time to sit down with a physical book in front of me, but I've got a lot of time when I can be listening to stuff because I'm walking between locations, or I'm doing housework, or I'm running, or I'm something, and I can listen. I was listening to stuff for 3 or 4 hours a day, taking copious notes, transcribing whole talks, knowing that the answers were in there. And over the space of about 6 weeks, I built up this whole picture which reframed my entire relationship to work and money. I didn't work a damn thing out. I immersed myself in the thoughts of people whose jobs it is, who are literally paid to explain to other people how to develop a relationship with God. And through 1,000 stories and 1,000 little things that I read and heard, God spoke to me. I couldn't have worked out any of those things. So meditation, AA provides me with a general framework, but AA definitely says you want to make use of what religious people have to offer. Be quick to see where they are right. Ignore where one doesn't think they're right. Just set that to one side, leave it for later consideration. But boy, there is so much to learn which is right, which is useful. There's enough for me to busy myself with then. And so when I'm in a good phase, I've been in a very good phase for quite a few months now, with barely a ripple on the waters. So, well, I know to watch out. There's something on its way. Anyway, When I'm in a good phase, I often don't need to read very much. Just a little quotation every day, that's enough for me. When I'm faced with challenges, I need to make sure that my consciousness is filled with higher ideas. So meditation is not about getting into my body or out of my mind. It's getting into the metaphysical realm and using other people's spiritual experiences as the passports to that metaphysical realm. And if all else fails, I go back to pages 84 to 88 and say, you know what? I'm too stupid to think anything by myself. I'm going to pretend that the answer to how to live my day lies in those 4 pages and just do precisely what it says. And when I do that, my life is amazing. And with 4 seconds to go, I'm going to stop. Thanks for listening.